Very good morning to all the dignitaries and participants present here today and watching us live on various social media platforms, but that unfortunately we are unable to do. And on behalf of the Water Policy Center, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our speaker, chair and participants at this distinguished lecture series. And today it is first lecture or inaugural lecture of this distinguished lecture series. Before introducing speaker, just let me introduce our think tank, that is Water Policy Center, and it is an independent think tank that conduct policy research on water and sustainable development. The Water Policy Center has been involved primarily in the research and advocacy activities in the areas of identification of water stress regime, and it advocates water regulations in the state and works in collaboration with the government at local and national level, particularly local level, and also provides some policy inputs to the government machineries. The Water Policy Center was established in 2014 by Venuganga Foundation, a registered society in Aurangabad, Maharashtra, and you can find updates at our website as well. This is an inaugural lecture in this distinguished lecture series, and we have with us Professor Srinivas Shokakula to deliver a lecture on provision for water in Union Budget of India. And Professor Srinivas is the Ministry of Jal Shakti Research Chair, Water Conflicts and Governance at Center for Policy Research, where he so we just mute people who are so he is chairing this Water Conflict and Governance Chair at Center for Policy Research, and where he leads the transboundary rivers, ecologies and development studies. At the chair, he engaged closely with the relevant government agencies and is often consulted on various water policy and institutional issues. Dr. Srinivas is currently a member of the drafting committee of India's national water policy, and Dr. Srinivas has a doctorate from the University of Washington, Seattle, and alumnus of the University of Miami, Florida, and the CPT University, and he is graduated from the Kakatiya University, Warangal. His research and policy interests lie primarily in the water sector, focusing on transboundary rivers, inland waterways, smart cities, and rural roads, and he writes widely on these issues. He is also a principal recipient of several international fellowships and scholarship. To moderate this lecture or this session today, we have with us Dr. Ashok Kumar Karia, who is a Chief Engineer and Head at the National Water Academy, which is the training agency of Central Water Commission, Jal Shakti Ministry, and which is located in Pune. Before joining the academy, Dr. Karia was director in the Central Water Commission for 10 years, where he looked after the climate change issues pertaining to water resources in India, and he has been working in the field of the water resources sector for last 32 years in various capacities. He joined Central Water Engineering Services in 1988, and since then he has been instrumental in various policy framing, including National Water Mission's documents, where he has served as a member secretary to a drafting committee of surface water management section. He has authored several reports and handbooks on water and climate change, notably a handbook for flood protection, anti-erosion and river training works published by the Central Water Commission. Dr. Karia has represented the Central Water Commission in various meetings, workshops and seminars. So coming to the theme, during the next an hour, this lecture will assess the government's allocation to the water sector and will discuss how the growing water scarcity requires a serious engagement to tackle the challenges. With this, I stop here and I invite Dr. Ashok Karia sir to take the floor and to moderate the session. Dr. Karya, floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rao Sahib. Let me first congratulate this Water Policy Center for organizing this such a insightful lecture. In fact, when budget is announced, there is discussion on various sectors, allocations and receipts and other things, but hardly on water. Though water is a subject, or everybody is a stakeholder in water. But since the whole implementation of program and other things, they are in government sector mainly, so they are hardly talked about in public domain in general. Nevertheless, when we talk about water, just to recap, we got 4% of precipitation, world's precipitation or rainfall in various forms in India, to support 16%, more than 16% of population, and more than 17% of cattle population. So certainly, for the with that amount of water and to serve this population, we require so many facilities. And there are so many issues, rapid urbanization, industrialization, changing lifestyle, poor water use efficiency, particularly in irrigation sector. So those are the things which require government intervention, focused intervention at large. And that's why there is provisions in budget as well as on both on the expenditure side and on revenue side as well. Earlier, when the ministry was having only, basically it was the Ministry of Water Resources, then we were having most of the figures with respect to major medium irrigation, minor irrigation, CAT-WM, and that kind of. But now there is this is Ministry of Jal Shakti, so more of the water-related organizations or other ministries have been clubbed with it, and so the budget also. So it will be very interesting to see that how the budget allocation are actually increasing, decreasing with respect to overall budget, with respect to sector. And basically in water, it is not only the budget of Ministry of Jal Shakti that is important, but the budget of say most of the work in Manrega, allocated to Manrega, those are also taken, they also work in the water sector, say, though very, in a very small structures kind of thing. So I hope that Dr. Chokakula will enlighten us on all these issues. And I welcome him for further deliberation and detailed discussion on this. Dr. Chokakula, please. You will have to unmute Dr. Chokakula. Or perhaps.
Okay, now, yeah. So it was earlier when I was trying, it was saying that the host has to unmute you. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Karya. That's quite a bit of an expectations, but I'm not sure whether I can really do the justice to these expectations. Partly because you have really sort of nailed it when you said that there are very little conversations whenever the budget is presented. There's very little conversations around water sector related allocations. And that has been a big gap in our knowledge generally. And it is something that I hope to address today, why it is the case. But before that, I'd like to thank Dr. Rao Bhaviskar for having me here. And I'm really pleased to learn that I am the first one to give this distinguished lecture series. I don't know how distinguished it would be, but I hope to, and I look forward to staying in touch with the other lectures that would be hosted by Water Policy Center. And thank you once again for having me. Just to quickly, I think the part of the reason, as you might know, and I'm sure you will all agree, part of the reason why these conversations are even getting attention, that, you know, this is one of those first few instances that I've been asked to talk on water sector related provisions in the budget. Part of the reason is also because of the significant allocations that were made this time, at least in this budget. And we need to, little bit of deconstructing is necessary, because, you know, as Mr. Karya said, it is Ministry of Jal Shakti now. It was not till 2019, it is Ministry of Water Resources, River Development, and Ganga Rejuvenation. And in various forms, the names changed, but essentially it is about water resources, development and management. But after merging this ministry with another ministry, Ministry for Drinking Water and Sanitation, I think the scales have changed, the numbers have changed. And that is part of the reason why, and also because of the renewed emphasis on drinking water security, particularly with this government. I think there is a greater attention being paid to the significant allocations made to this particular ministry. But otherwise, if you look at it historically, Ministry of, you know, in its erstwhile shape, in the sense like when it was Ministry of Water Resources, while there was significant interest in the very beginning, in the first 5-year plan, and then, but it has gradually reduced over time. And I'll come to those numbers and then to put it in context later. But if you look at it, at least till in the last 1 decade, if you look at Ministry of Water Resources and other allied ministries, like for example, Ministry of Power, which actually quite a significant portfolio, part of the portfolio is Ministry of the hydropower projects. And also Ministry of Agriculture, which has significant impact on water use. If you look at these ministries, over the last 1 decade, while the usual rate of, you know, increase that Ministry of Water Resources has maintained, something like 3 times it was from 2010 to 2021 or so, the other ministries have had almost 10 times increase in their allocations. That itself shows that Ministry of Water Resources has been somewhat neglected in its allocations. But now that we have Ministry of, Ministry of Jal Shakti, where you have both, Ministry of Department of Water Resources, which was earlier called Ministry of Water Resources, and now Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation. Both of them, when they came together, we are talking about 2021 and 22 having an allocation of something like 70,000 crores. Out of which, again, if you can look at closely the numbers, they are primarily the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, which has got the lion's share, which is almost like 83% of this entire 70,000 crores. So it's pretty much about 60,000 crores have been allocated to Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, and somewhat close to 10,000 crores, just little less than 10,000 crores has gone to Ministry of Department of Water Resources. Now that itself, if you look at it, has a kind of annualized, Department of Water Resources has a minor increase, like 10% if you look at 2018 and 19 allocations. And whereas if you compare with 2018-19 allocations, Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation has received an increase of almost like 80% of allocation. So we are really talking about, if you look at Department of Water Resources, it is the usual heads that, if you can, for those people who really want to know a little bit more about these numbers clearly, you can actually, I can suggest a couple of references, which I think you would find it useful in terms of the specific numbers and the performances of various schemes. But before that, just to look at it, you see, if Department of Water Resources primary programs, as you know, is the Prime Minister Kisan Sinchai Yojana. And that's the one which essentially sort of gets the major share. And that is a primary program, one of the flagship programs that Ministry of Water Resources implements. Whereas, and then the other one is the program that is related to Namami Gange. And then there are other institutions which get allocations. But it is the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, which is a very interesting portfolio. As you know, there was earlier a Jal Jeevan mission, which was called as rural. And now there is a Jal Jeevan mission urban that was announced in the budget speech by the finance minister of 2021 and 22 for the budget. And that gets the significant portion of it. Almost 50,000 crores goes to the combined Jal Jeevan, both rural and urban. And out of which also just a little bit of note is that when it comes to Jal Jeevan urban, when it comes to Jal Jeevan rural, the earlier National Rural Drinking Water Mission is subsumed under that. Whereas when it comes to the Jal Jeevan Mission urban, you would also have partly, significant portion of it for drinking water security, but also there is also a portion that is allocated for treating the liquid water discharge. And that is the sludge kind of management programs, which is actually more to do with the Swachh Bharat and the sanitation part of it. So it's, when it comes to drinking water sector allocation, drinking water security allocations, we are talking about almost like 40,000 crores at least this year. Now, that basically changes the scales, and we will talk about it a little bit, about these. The idea is to give you these numbers and the kind of stakes that are associated with different programs, just to in the beginning. But as I did say, for those people who would like to learn a little bit more about these numbers, there are at least two of them which I rely on for my own reading, and which is from Center for Policy Research. You can say there is an accountability initiative that does analysis of Jal Jeevan Mission and other kind of programs when budgetary allocations, and they release budgetary briefs. So you can look up budgetary brief on Jal Jeevan Mission. And there is another institution which was earlier with the Center for Policy Research, which is called Parliamentary Research Services, which regularly releases policy updates and other kind of, monitors parliamentary functions, and also produces briefs that are very useful, which has a brief on the Ministry of Jal Shakti itself. They're very useful references for those people who are interested in learning a little bit more on these. Now, let's just to quickly talk about it. If you look at, as I did say, the Ministry of Water Resources itself has, has the attention that was received by the Ministry of Water Resources has gradually reduced over time. But there is a very interesting upward swing when it comes to since 2014, you could say that particularly this government has had more allocations for this sector, water sector as such. And after merging these two ministries, and significantly it looks much bigger. But if you look at the primary budget line, which is about irrigation and flood control, over time, since independence, since the first 5-year plan and the latest 5-year plan, the 11th 5-year plan, if you look at it, just, as you know, water is a state subject to the powers that are allocated to union on regulation and development of interstate rivers. Now, but it is often looked at very often, partly because for several reasons, we can talk about it, we can come back to them, that it is exclusively state subject because it enjoys dominant executive power. States enjoy dominant executive power. So if you look at the kind of changing stakes, the kind of financial allocations over time, since the first 5-year plan till recently, the kind of shifts that have happened are quite mind-boggling. At least the numbers that we have and the kind of analysis that we have done is that in the first 5-year plan outlay, water sector propositions between center and states, if you look at them, center was contributing to almost 60% of the entire outlay, whereas all the states together were contributing to just 40%. Now, over the past 6 to 7 decades, what has happened is that and particularly in this budget line, so there are other budget lines that you can talk about, like river rejuvenation and other things, but on the irrigation and flood control budget line, if you look at it, that has reduced significantly the center's contribution. It is primarily states' contribution. So from 40%, from 60% that center was contributing to irrigation and flood control budgetary allocations, it has come to mere 4%. Whereas states which were contributing 40% in the first 5-year plan outlay for irrigation and flood control have increased significantly by 96%. So you see the reason why very often it is assumed and presumed that it is a state subject is because of the significant increase in the way states have started investing in it, and the center has sort of reduced its own footprint in that space in terms of water sector. Now, that is one way of giving the way the shifts, the stakes have changed between center and states. However, it is no longer the case. I mean, we can't continue with the status quo. And I'll come back to the way it has, the increase that we see in the past 4 or 5 years, the increased allocations in the water sector, though for drinking water security, still matter in working with this, with states, between center and states towards longer term security and sustainability, if you want to look at it. See, the India's own development ambitions in water sector, while, not ambitions, but development plans and even, sustainable development goals and security goals. If you look at it, the most of these programs are increasingly becoming interstate in nature. So which basically means that the center is supposed to play a significant role in it. Whereas the center unfortunately has somewhat, lost its ground, if I may say, and that is the way I have argued earlier, is that center has lost its ground in working in the sector because of various reasons. And there are other scholars also who have written about it. And one is Ramaswamy Iyer, who said that there was an abdication of its role over time. And I said that abdication of its role is as if it is voluntarily, it has given away. But I would say that there is a certain kind of lost ground. And in another instance, it was also called as a kind of federal anarchy. There is very little role for the center to secure and talk about national water security goals and national sustainability goals. As you know, I mean, you can look at all the indicators, and we are really worried about what also Bhavskar has initially said, also the kind of scarcity situation in certain parts and the uneven development of water resources across the space, and also the kind of increased risks that we are facing. And as Mr. Karia also said about the climate change kind of risks that are coming up. If you look at it, the entire challenges in water governance, they are increasingly becoming more federal in nature, in the sense like center and states will have to work. The idea of when states continue to pursue their own water resources development programs, they don't necessarily look at the implications of their pursuance of water resources development in terms of the impacts at the national level, security and sustainability indicators. That's not how they pursue. They often respond to their own constituencies, their own territorial interests, and they don't always look at the larger interests, very often because of the kind of absence of deliberative space between states and center to talk about the longer term goals and how they should go about it. And also because of the kind of lost ground that I talked about. Now there is a renewed interest. You take any kind of projects, that flagship projects that we're talking about. Obviously, there is a significant and kind of awareness and consciousness about shifting from supply augmentation to demand side management. That is one bigger. Obviously, you cannot ask certain states to do it and certain states not to do it. But at the same time, you can't also do the other way around, because certain states haven't pursued supply augmentation to the extent that they could do. whereas certain states have done much better. So there is a kind of coordinated effort that is necessary to shift itself. So there is a kind of federal, the kind of centers coordination that is with the states towards a certain particular direction is necessary. At the same time, if you look at the kind of ambitious programs that we have, take river rejuvenation, Ganga river rejuvenation. It is primarily an interstate project, though it has got a significant attention at the moment because of the kind of focus that this government puts on it. But you take river rejuvenation, you take inland navigation, you take even interbasin transfer, all these programs, all these developmental programs that we have are primarily interstate in nature. Now, that actually tells you that there is a need for the center and states to work together to pursue the development as well as sustainability goals within the water sector. Now, how are we doing when you look at it? What is the kind of federal governance that happens at the moment? I mean, as you know, under the, this union has the only way that union under the constitution that it can exercise federal governance, that is working with the states to pursue certain goals with the state, in water sector, is using the Entry 56 provisions, which is about its own powers about regulating and developing interstate rivers. What has the union done so far in that space using that provisions under the constitution? They have legislated one act, which is called River Boards Act, 1956. And that River Boards Act, if you are aware of it, has never been used to set up all the river boards that you look at, that Bhakra Bias or otherwise, the recent most Krishna and Godavari river boards, or Narmada Command Authority. They have never used that force of that law that was created primarily for the center to exercise its powers to work with states. So essentially means that if the act that was created was never used, means that there has been a vacuum. There's very little that we have done using Entry 56 provisions. So it is the only other means of working, or otherwise when the union work comes into picture when it comes to water governance issues, is disputes resolution, as you know. But that doesn't draw on Entry 56 provisions. It draws on the constitutional provisions that are given under Article 262. And as you know, there is very little role for the center in resolving these disputes too. It just mediates between the states and then it refers to the tribunal. So literally, if you look at the federal water governance space in general, for the center to work with states, there is absolute vacuum when it comes to legal provisions and their effect. The other kind of provisions that you see is the institutional provisions. So you have the Central Water Commission, you have National Water Academy, you have National Institute of Hydrology, you have Center, CSWRI kind of research station for. So if you look at this institutional leverage, that is also, I mean, the kind of relations. I mean, Maharashtra itself has created its own institution in dealing with certain water governance challenges, and it tends to reduce its reliance on these federal institutions. So that is the kind of state of affairs when it comes to federal governance. The only other kind of important leverage has always been the fiscal leverage. So if you look at the kind of the numbers that I have mentioned about it, the center's contribution in irrigation and flood control reducing to almost 4% is the space that actually tells you that, keep that in mind, that we have a vacuum in federal governance. At the same time, increasingly the federal, the kind of challenges and the kind of risks that we are facing in water sector requires federal response. You see the gap that you see. So you have, on one point, federal governance is rendered ineffective for various reasons. But on the other hand, we are increasingly becoming federal in terms of the needs for responding to water governance challenges. And this is where I think these increased allocations in the budgets are extremely important. Now, I mean, obviously, as I did say, I mean, water, this is another challenge. As one of the biggest challenge with water sector is that you cannot just restrict your analysis to Ministry of Jal Shakti, for example. As you know, Ministry of Agriculture, if you go by the public numbers, 70 to 80% actually goes to the agriculture. And that is where the significant improvements can be done. But it is not within the Ministry of, the purview of Minister of Jal Shakti to do it. So it's very difficult to talk in water sector in an isolated manner, but with all the limitations that we have, this is the kind of learnings that we have. At the same time, it is important to sort of recognize that, it's part of the reason. Just going back to what I said is that it is for that particular reason that we can't hold on to the numbers that we're talking to, because significant water usage is done and engagement with water sector is done outside the ministry. So the numbers that I'm sharing are actually that I'm talking about are primarily indicative. They're not definitive in any sense, but it gives a picture about what kind of challenge that we have in terms of, and particularly in terms of improving I wouldn't call it, improving federal water governance. I wouldn't call it making center more powerful, actually, because that's a very unfortunate way of looking at things. Is that the moment you say that you want to strengthen the federal water governance, they say that you want to have a stronger role for the center. It is not stronger role for the center. It is more proactive role for the center. It doesn't necessarily, power doesn't necessarily mean that it is a creation of a hierarchy, but power also means that it is about redistribution of roles and functions in a synergistic manner to pursue a certain kind of water governance challenges. So so with all these limitations in the back of our mind, we need to sort of realize that how can we use this increased allocations for water sector. So we have got almost 40,000, let us put it this way, in fact 50,000. You can even include the entire DDWS, the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, as the resources that are flowing to states. And these are, as you know, put together, Jal Jeevan Mission, at least the outlay as it stands for the next few years till 2024 and beyond, including this Jal Jeevan Urban, you're talking about almost more than 6 lakh crores of money that is flowing under central sponsored scheme framework between center and states in the ratio of 60-40, flowing to states. Now think about the kind of, obviously, as you know, drinking water security itself is fundamentally a state subject. In fact, it actually is a subject of the third tier of the decentralization. It's actually a subject of the ULBs and the other rural panchayats, basically. So here is what I would like to sort of say that, you see, and this is what something that I have written about, is that Jal Jeevan Mission, the increased allocations is a big opportunity for the larger water resources management towards long-term security and sustainability, for pursuing those goals. It's not just about drinking water security, but it is also about improving water governance, water indicators, water sector indicators at the national level that are that are indicative of security and sustainability. The reason why I say it is that here is an improved leverage that center can use to ask the states to work with it towards improving the security and sustainability indicators. For example, as people like Mr. Kharia would know, the biggest challenge in interbasin transfer, or even in fact, if you talk to National Mission for Clean Ganga, it's not often acknowledged, but many of people, those people who are close to, in proximity to it, acknowledge that the biggest challenge and blind spot is interstate cooperation. Because once the assets are created to clean water resources, as it is being done at the moment, how do these assets get continue? How can you make sure that they continue to work to maintain that cleaner status of Ganga or other rivers that we are interested in rejuvenating it in quality? So interstate cooperation in terms of states institutionalizing the programs that center initiates itself is a big challenge. Now, if you want to do that, the only way, and in fact, that is why I call Jal Jeevan Mission is an opportunity, but there are several risks in it, associated with it. It's an opportunity to get the states to the table and deliberate about the national level security and sustainability indicators. So you can actually use the resources as a leverage for the states to agree on, on a certain role for the center. For example, you know that how difficult it is to get simple things like data of use of water resources from the states. That itself is the biggest black box that we have. And we keep fighting within that black box. And unfortunately, that is a significant portion of litigation and significant portion of fighting that creates the inertia in water sector is because of that data. That itself, you can actually, center can negotiate that I would, it is possible for me to invest in infrastructure so that the states would follow certain.
Dr. Jogokula, just time.
Yeah, okay. So is it past time? Okay, 11:40. So it is important that, it can negotiate with the states to make the states work with the center towards these goals. Now, the risks that when it comes to, and while it is a big opportunity, the risks when it comes to it is that, you see, this is what the first thing is that, you might say that very often this is the kind of criticism that you receive, that increased footprint of the center or over the domain, in the domain of the ULBs or the panchayats and the state primarily, which is their domain, is probably is against the kind of principles and spirits of the federal water governance. I wouldn't call it in terms of increased footprint, because it does flow and the states continue to sort of invest in it. But there are two ways of looking at it. One is to make sure that whether you can strengthen the ULB and other kind of panchayat capacity to make sure that the assets and the kind of facilities that are created on the Jal Jeevan Mission would be, maintained even after the mission is over. Now, that kind of institutionalization of this program is the biggest risk. If you look at other programs also, like the most successful programs, central sponsored schemes like the Prime Minister Gram Sadak Yojana, there are these roads that are created. And you can clearly see the difference between those states which have institutionalized that program vis-a-vis those states which haven't institutionalized those programs. And you see that clearly the roads after the 5-year period that the center provides for, the roads start deteriorating in those states which haven't institutionalized that program. But in those states which have institutionalized this program, you would see those roads maintained by the local, state level agencies. And there are even some states that have created their own, Gram Sadak Yojanas called Chief Minister Gram Sadak Yojana. That is the kind of, transformation that center needs to look at. So the focus is not just about providing the connections, but also creating the institutional infrastructure to sustain and create those enduring outcomes for with this. So there are two levels in terms of, one is to make sure that you can use that as an opportunity to bring the states towards working with the national level development and security goals. And another is to make sure that this is, institutionalized within the states for enduring outcomes. I'll just close it here and then perhaps we can talk the rest of the things during question and answer sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jogokula, and it's really very enlightening, and on many aspects, basically, when you told that from first plan, what was the sharing between the center and state for creation of particularly irrigation facilities, and now what is the status as on in the last plan, and certainly as you basically build up that to call out all the budgetary allocation for water is really difficult, because say 10,000 crore has been provided for micro irrigation in Ministry of Agriculture. As I told in my initial remark, that for Manrega and a lot of money given to Manrega basically spent in creation of local water resources or improving water resources. That kind of intersectoral things are there, so it is difficult. But nevertheless, since there is this Ministry of Jal Shakti now has a Department of Drinking Water, so a large chunk of budgetary allocation is now very well reflected in under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. I would open for the participants of this session for putting up their questions to Dr. Chokakula or to me or anybody else can answer. Please.
You can ask your question directly. You just unmute yourself. Surabhi, just unmute all. Just change the setting.
So chat. I should change the settings of chat box, right?
No, allow them to unmute all the participants.
Okay, sir.
And we have Rajat Pandey, who is a member of Planning Commission of MP Madhya Pradesh. I think I request him to ask question or comment as well, because he's also on the policy making circle.
All right, sir. It was indeed a very good lecture. It was indeed a very good insight about what you thought about it, what was going on. I just have one question. Just like some of the developed countries have the water trading facilities, like the access to water is there. So there is a possibility that in India also it should be there, because there are certain cities in India which are running towards the water scarcity. They are running towards the zero water policy there. So do you think that water trading in terms of accessibility should be allowed in India or not?
Well, it's a tough question, because you see, the devil is in the details. What do you mean by water trading is the big question. And there are different kinds of water trading that are in practice across different platforms. And very often we don't get a sense with this emotive sense of putting some price. Without putting some price, we can't ensure that water is used responsibly. With that kind of emotive, the usual response is that let us get into attaching some cost to water, and then get into this regime of water trading. There is one problem, at least my intuitive sense, that tells me about shifting making such a large radical shift without looking into the details that I was talking about, is the problem of exacerbating the existing inequities and inequalities.
All right.
Now, if you look at the recent most, and very often not many people have paid attention to, is that there is recently Delhi has bought water resources from Himachal Pradesh that is allocated there from of that allocated a certain portion of allocated portion under Yamuna, and in fact it has gone ahead without involving the union in any matter. It has become a bilateral agreement between Delhi and Himachal Pradesh.
Right, sir.
And Delhi's bought this at a certain rate, and Himachal Pradesh, because it could not augment the allocated resources that was allocated to them under the 1986 agreement, if I recall right. The Upper Yamuna River Board was also not involved. Now, if you leave it for the free market, the question is, at the moment, the Himachal Pradesh could afford to sell it. Now, what about its future demands? Has it been properly thought through? We don't have clear sense of it. And similar kind of trends, I'm sure, close to you, which is Chhattisgarh is interested in selling their own Godavari waters to other states. Now, my problem, particularly without an anchor in setting up certain kind of procedural and protocols, procedural, means while keeping the equity and equality considerations. If we jump into water trading, there is a serious future consequences that we need to deal with.
Right.
So I would put it as a kind of qualified response, as saying that without doing our homework, we can't really talk about this.
But there has to be a policy. There has to be some logic.
Oh, that's precisely what I'm saying, is that we do need to have a clear sense of what kind of implications of such a trading, and at what scale, and for what kind of uses. There are different levels of considerations that we should keep in mind. All said and done, one needs to realize that India is, there is an American exceptionalism, there is an Indian exceptionalism. One has to accept it. It's an Indian union, and that union has been put together with several asymmetrical, asymmetries and uneven development. So there are this whole bunch of states that haven't invested in water resources development. And there are this whole bunch of states which have invested and have been having advanced irrigation development. And there's that unevenness, if you don't keep it in mind, it's going to create serious issues.
Okay, sir. I will do a little bit of research more on it.
Sure. Please do share with us.
Yes, I will. We have such brilliant platforms, so I think I will share all the details.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There is one comment or some request from Ms. Saraswati Unni in chat box.
Yeah.
Despite the improved allocations, we may still be faced with an acute water shortage this summer.
Yes.
Because of inadequate focus on water resources and prevention of degradation, lakes, ponds, springs, etc.
Yes, yes. This is exactly why I asked the question, because I know that this is heading towards this way only. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Unni, ma'am. Thank you, Saraswati, ma'am, for putting out the for putting it on the words itself.
So, anyone else?
Unni ma'am, do you have any question? You can ask directly.
She needs to be unmuted, I think. She needs to be unmuted.
Please unmute yourself.
No, I think the host has to unmute.
Okay. That is a different kind of setting here.
Yeah, no, yes.
No,
yeah,
please.
So I think you can hear me now.
Yes,
yeah.
And as I wrote in the chat box, my problem was with the lack of concern, not concern, but not enough attention being paid to the source of water and the degradation that's taking place. So I actually wanted Professor Srinivas to comment on that as to, we would definitely be facing a water crisis this summer too. Okay, despite the huge allocations in the mission, the JIM mission. So why is there not enough attention being paid to the source of the water, such as lakes, ponds, and their degradation? And is this the responsibility of the state governments or the central government? Of course, we do know this is shared. And as you pointed out, those states which have given, they have their own institutional methods for dealing with the water crisis have been doing better. So I just want further comments on this as to what can be done to prevent the impending water crisis.
Well, that's a big, the water quality is a key issue. And just to, from the perspective of the union budget, if you want me to talk about it, I think this is where it comes, that division of powers applies here. It is primarily the kind of resources, water sources that you're talking about, other than interstate rivers. If you go by the law, other than interstate rivers, if you take other sources that are sources for drinking water supply, it is primarily a state's responsibility to ensure, to manage the quality of water sources. Yet, in fact, you would see that the National Water Quality Mission gets significant allocations under the budget. In fact, within the Department of Water Resources allocations, you see that there is a significant National Water Quality Mission that is given some resources which is improvement compared to the earlier. And that is what I think probably is feeding this new awareness and consciousness, which is actually through CPCB, which is monitoring the stretches, 350 odd stretches, river stretches, and but regularly reporting the quality. When it comes in these interstate rivers, when it comes to quality in interstate rivers, I would say that it is receiving adequate attention, and I'm fairly satisfied with it, is that first of all, there is a mission that brings in at least knowledge about it and awareness. And second one, the interesting part is that it is a significant collective interest that is bringing states together. what I learned from, for example, National Mission for Clean Ganga, is that the riparian states are interested in talking more about quality issues than quantity issues. So the degradation of quality in these interstate rivers, whether it is Ganga or other areas, it's actually attracting good collective action that we would like the states to engage in improving the quality. Now, when it comes to ponds and lakes kind of resources, it is primarily and essentially a state's domain. It is within the state's domain. And the fact that states are showing interest in water quality issues, that actually tells that there is awareness among the states about the quality of water resources within the states. In fact, I would actually, depending on the size of the lakes and the ponds, and I would divide these responsibilities between the states and the third tier bodies, which are panchayats and ULBs. And there are very powerful instruments that are there that could be used effectively to improve the quality of water resources. And I have always said, when it comes to urban lakes and ponds conservation, I think one of those instruments, at least one of the instruments that I can tell you with confidence, because I've been trained as an urban environmental planner, is that the master plan is a very powerful instrument to protect these sources and water bodies within the urban areas. And similar kind of instruments can be used to protect the water bodies within the rural areas as well. But it is primarily state's responsibility, and there are enough resources. And it is primarily, as I think there are enough incentives and disincentives for the states to basically act on them. It should be coming from the states as a response to that problem. But otherwise, water quality is what is that called? In fact, recently there is a very interesting report by the World Bank on invisible crisis. You see, the long-term use of fertilizers that we have inherited probably has had even contaminated significantly the groundwater resources. So that kind of invisibility water crisis that exists, and then there is a need to respond. So I see that center and states can respond, but as I did say, center has to use the kind of increased allocations to bring the states together and make them aware and respond with the right kind of instruments. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So any more actually questions from the participants?
Any question you can write in chat box actually.
Yeah, I don't see any questions.
Okay, so can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Bhaskar?
Yeah, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is about the water linking project, the National Water Linking Project. I just want to know about the environmental safety of this project, the status of this project. Is it actually on? Because I'm not able to get information on that project anymore. So I want to know.
See, well, please finish your question.
Yeah, the water linking project, is it actually on? Is it sustainable? Is it environmentally safe? These are the questions.
Well, environmentally safe is a very vague word, in the sense like I mean, there is never a development that doesn't lead to certain kind of consequences which are not necessarily safe. So, I mean, it is about our, we need to set our limits.
Part of the development versus environment debate.
Yes, that's a bigger debate when it comes to. But when it comes to interlinking of rivers project, it is very much on, at least to my knowledge. And but they haven't been able to make significant progress because of the kind of resistance that it receives with the kind of concerns that we just shared right now. And if you look at least one or two projects that you see, which is Ken Betwa, and I think another one which is under consideration, which is being pursued. The first thing is that National Interlinking Project is not a single project. It's actually, it is being, projected and it's being, framed as a kind of mega project. It is not the case. It's actually several parts to it. And that is where we need to discriminate, is that where that kind of linking would help and where it would not help. So that kind of discrimination, unfortunately, doesn't exist at the moment in the public discourse. But when it comes to my own opinion, when it comes to interlinking of rivers, as I did say, is the significant block is that interstate cooperation between the states to go ahead with it. And that is because of, I mean, whether it is good or bad is a separate conversation. But the point is that why it is not progressing, what is the status of it? If you want me to pin one significant problem, it is the interstate cooperation and coordination that the center has not been able to achieve. And as I did say, for these kind of interstate projects and an improved federal water governance, it is necessary for this, it is imperative for the center to use this leverage that that it has through this Jal Jeevan Mission.
Actually, basically, interlinking project is a kind of any other water resources project. So environmental implication or environmental impact will be same as in any other project. Basically, it is not some kind of very different from others. And it will depend on the when the need of water will further increase. So then you will have to increase your resources like that. Once its time will come, you will have to have water resources or water sources from wherever it is possible. As Dr. Chokula, it is not a single project. Basically, it is a series of projects. In fact, maybe because of since all the projects have been clubbed as a interlinking project, had it been not so, maybe the individual projects might have come, or some of the projects might have come because of the cooperation between the states. That may be the situation in respect of interlinking of projects. This will certainly be a good one. It is not actually only transferring from one river basin to another, but to supplement all the water bodies along the transferring mechanism, say canal, if it is transferring from one, like Ken Betwa, given example by Dr. Chokakula. So from Ken river, the water is getting transferred to Betwa, but in between, wherever there are habitation, villages, or wherever agricultural water is required, so it is basically supplementing the irrigation requirement, drinking water requirement, and most importantly, the very water deficit area, kind of Bundelkhand area, which is water scarce. So that is the situation. It is not the whole water of the Ken will come. Otherwise, also that area was needing water. So I think time is up. This is certainly very interesting topic to discuss, and not much talked about. We already shared this thing. I would suggest if people are interested that very recent publication of Central Water Commission, Financial Aspects of Irrigation Projects in India. So this is on its website, and it gives quite a good information in respect of allocation, expenditure, not only by the central government, but by the individual states also, and then the whole this thing. But it limits itself to major medium irrigation project, minor irrigation project, and command area development. Certainly, there is a need for further exploration or further examining the budgetary allocation in respect of all the water resources development schemes from the center or from the state. And that will be very good. I hope that Water Policy Center may like to take it up further. And I'm very sure that that can be guided or supplemented by Dr. Chokakula, and from myself, means from National Water Academy, we will support this endeavor if you can take some kind of a paper or some kind of further research in this aspect. So, if there is nothing more,
sir, sorry to interrupt. There's one question on chat box. There's one question.
Okay, there has been recent issue.
So one, Mr. Amit Bhattacharya. Yes. Okay.
This Nangal is about channel for repairing purpose primarily by BBMB may affect the water supply in Delhi. Are similar issue in near or long term with emerging crises like climate, hydrological uncertainty, entry points for interstate water dispute in the mid to long term too? Dr. Chokula, if you like to.
Yes, I mean, I think you have raised a very important question. In fact, that is this kind of, given the kind of uncertainties across space as well as time when it comes to water. This is an important issue that you see some of this, there is a need for an enduring cooperation, or let's at least coordination, if not cooperation. And in fact, ideally, there should be an enduring cooperation between states, a cooperation ecosystem for the states to talk about these issues. Like when Nangal is, that is repaired, then Delhi would be affected. So there is a certain kind of channel through which these two states could talk. I mean, bilaterally, it is always possible. But as I did say, I mean, and I have written for a while about this kind of deliberative space at the federal level, is that we should create an enduring space for the states to, engage with each other on these kind of issues, to deal with these possible differences that might escalate into disputes, and to mitigate those from becoming a dispute. It is important that we should have a credible, legitimate space for the states to talk about. And I have always argued that we haven't adequately used the Article 263 provisions under the Constitution for the Interstate Council, creation of Interstate Council. I mean, I always believed that it is not a coincidence that a very peculiar provision of barring the jurisdiction of interstate disputes, which is under Article 262, is followed by a need for Interstate Council as a deliberative space. So I think they are very closely linked. And it's probably for at least for the problems that arise between states, the differences that might come, the challenges of coordination could be addressed by the Article 263 sanctioned Interstate Council. As I have written earlier also, the problem as it stands right now, yes, it was created after the Sarkaria Commission recommendations, but it is located as a department of Home Affairs. Very often when it becomes part of a ministry, the federal institutions are, they are perceived as those institutions that are subject to that, political establishment. So because it is an executive, and very often it is very difficult to expect certain kind of, trust among the states to use those spaces for resolving their differences. So it is very important that we create and nurture those kind of deliberative spaces for both center state as well as interstate coordination. And that is another space that could be created using the leverage that I was talking about with the increased allocations of water resources under Jal Jeevan Mission.
So I think this is all. I hope that we have deliberated on the issue in quite good length, and discussed about the various aspects, even beyond the topic, basically, even interstate issues and how the cooperation should. So, but with this, I thank very much to Dr. Chokakula for giving this enlightened lecture on very important subject. In fact, it should find place in other medias also, beyond discussion on this platform. But in print media or other media also, there should be more deliberation on budgetary aspect or other aspects with respect to water. And with this, since nothing more, I congratulate Dr. Rao Sahab for starting this series. I don't know what is the future plan, but I would like to know. So you can share with your plan for this knowledge series and through email, and we will be very happy to actually join wherever we can find out. Thank you, everybody.
Sure, sir, sure. We will take this lecture series, distinguished lecture series, we call it, further, and we have planned like inviting people who are actually contributing not just in policy making on water, but also who are engaged in water literacy and other aspects of water. So we'll surely communicate, and I'm sure, and I hope one of our next speaker will be like Karya sir. So we'll be expecting your cooperation from Srinivas sir, from Karya sir, and all the other dignitaries like Rajat Pandey sir joined here. So like all the people. And formally, just let me thank all the Chokapula sir for giving this very wonderful lecture and enlightening the participants. Most of the actually young people here, students and some researchers, they were actually eager to understand what exactly contribution, financial aspect of the water. And thank you for delivering such a wonderful lecture and inaugurating this lecture series. And I also thank Dr. Karya sir for accepting our invitation to chair this session. And he has not just chaired the session like we see just in technical words, but he has also contributed in this discourse. And I think this is the benefit to invite people from the same area to chair the session or moderate the session. Then you can enlighten from the both sides, like from speaker and as well as from the chair. And I think sir has done that job very well. Thank you for this acceptance, and also thank you all the participants who are actually participated and given your time. Thank you very much, and stay connected with us in future as well. We need your